Looks like everyone's in push-to-talk mode here. Everyone, if let me go ahead and address the people that are here. Just give them a little bit of a heads up. Guys, if you're new to VenueGen, I'll give you some quick instructions on how to use this. I'm David Gardner, and I'm here to moderate today with Tony and Karl Kapp with their presentations. If you look up here, you can probably see the heads-up display that you are viewing in front of you now with everything open. This is you in the right-hand corner here where I'm pointing. And if you want to open these buttons, this will give you facial expressions. This one will let you, this middle one will let you raise your hand. This is raise your hand here, what I'm pointing at. So if you guys want to practice raising your hand for a minute, that way if you have questions, you can just raise your hand and I'll call on you. There you go. Great. I see many of you doing that. If you really are excited about raising your hand, you can double click that and it will give you a high profile version of raising your hand. And if you click and hold, you'll just keep raising your hand until you release it. Now, guys, to look around, you just click and drag where you want to look. There'll be a little circle appear in your screen. So everybody look over at me here. Everybody try to look at my face for a minute. Just click and put that circle over here on my face. Good, good. I see most of you looking here. Now, so just click and drag where you want to look, and if you want to zoom your focus in, just use your mouse wheel and roll forward, and you can zoom your focus right in to see Tony's face or to view content up on the screen there. If you don't have a mouse wheel, you can use the plus and minus key to zoom your focus in and out. Just hold in your plus or minus key. That's pretty much it. You guys, you now know everything that you need to know to use this to use VenueGen. So raise your hand if you have questions, and I'll call on you, and you can direct those questions to Tony or Karl. We're going to wait just a minute longer here for Karl to show up. If he's not here in just a minute, Tony, maybe we'll go ahead and start. Can we start with just your talk?
Yeah, sure,
guys,
absolutely.
can you hear me?
Oh, hey, Karl. I can hear you.
Hey, how you doing? I'm sitting here in the back, just kind of hanging out. I'm not the moderator, so I'm just back here, you know.
He needs the power.
Oh yes. Let me make you a moderator, and then you can come to the front here. All right. I see you, Karl, sneaking in the back.
That's right, yeah. Like a cameo appearance here.
Actually, it says that you have all the content, all of the privileges, Karl. Try just right-clicking on yourself and say stand up.
Yeah, I think I just got him.
There you go. It looks like some people here have put custom faces on. That's really impressive, guys. All right, Karl, you guys have a seat, and we'll go ahead and kick this off. Guys, if you get tired of seeing everyone's names floating around, there's a couple of buttons over here on the bottom left that will let you turn off the names from floating around. If you want to turn those off, or if you turn this one on, you'll just see the names of the person who's speaking. And if you want to, you can right-click on me or Tony or Karl. If you right-click on us, you can turn our volume up or down, and that's just how you'll hear us. It doesn't affect how the rest of the room hears us. But a very granular control, and you can set that to however you'd like it to be. Now, Anna, I'm getting a little bit of feedback through your mic, so I'm going to put you in push-to-talk mode. All that means is you'll have to hold down the tab key while you're talking. Or actually, you're on the dial-in. Would you mind, Anna, muting your phone a little bit for us, just so we don't get any feedback through?
Like your glasses, Karl.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I put the picture in, so I'm pretty close to what I look like.
There you go. I had the same experience, so.
Wow, Karl, you do look like yourself.
Dude, I feel like myself, too.
Something to do with the sense itself, is it, Karl?
Great.
Yeah,
well, let's
just a
go ahead
little.
and kick it off. I'm sure we're going to have other people joining us here. Will be popping in, and but I want to go ahead and get started today. As I said, just for any of you that arrived late, just click and drag on the screen, left click and drag on the screen where you want to look. You can drag around to look, use your mouse wheel or your plus and minus keys to zoom your focus in and out. And we'll take questions periodically. I'll ask if there are any questions, and you can raise your hand. You can raise your hand by pushing this button here and then selecting the hand raising here. And you can right-click on me or on the presenters and turn them up or down. If anyone around you is making noise, just right-click on them and you can mute them. So that's the. We'll go ahead and kick it off now. So, guys, I'm going to close this slide out and bring up the introduction of our speakers. So that's not it. Excuse just one second. It's called the opening slides. Here we are. So anyway, we've got some great guests today presenting. These guys really are the people who you would consider as the experts in immersive learning and online modalities. First and foremost, let's see, or at least first today in my order of introducing them is Karl Kapp. Dr. Karl Kapp is professor of instructional technology at Bloomberg University in Pennsylvania. He specializes in the convergence of learning and technology and business operations. He's a sought-after speaker and writer. Kapp is recognized as a thought leader in e-learning, instructional design, adult learning theory, and conducting learning events for both CEOs and frontline staff in enterprise environments. He has co-authored a book today with his counterpart here, Dr. Tony O'Driscoll, who's been a longtime friend of mine. He is a professor of practice at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business, where he's also serving as the executive director of the Fuqua Center for Technology, Entertainment, and Media, a research center dedicated to the understanding of strategic, structural, operational, and business model issues associated with these vibrant and volatile sectors. So these are the guys who generally speak and write on this subject. Today, they're here to talk about their new book, Learning in 3D. And this has come out a few months ago, and it's kind of like the Bible now on what people are doing with immersive spaces and the challenges that they're facing and the successes that they are having. So at any rate, I would like to go ahead and just kind of turn it over to them, and they can start talking and tell you about what they're doing and about their book, and then we'll have some moderated questions from the floor. So Karl, Tony?
Great. Well, seeing as we're in an immersive environment, I think it just makes sense for us to come out here and say hi.
Hi,
how's everybody?
Thanks for joining us today.
How's it going out there? Good. So if you hit the put to talk, then you can respond, and I'm seeing some claps and everything. So thank you so much for being here. Karl and I are partners in crime on this book over here, and we want to thank David for inviting us in. I've been fortunate enough to view a lot of this work that David and his team have been doing with VenueGen over the last 3 years, and I can say that it's really come a long way. And just zoom in here with the reticule and look in, and even that Tina in the back of the room looks like she's paying attention, which when I used to sit in the back of the room there, I did not. So I'm finding this interface very useful. So kudos to you, David.
Thank you, Tony.
So let me just pull up here some content. Karl, if you want to introduce yourself, I'm just going to go see where our content is here.
Sure, yeah. So I'm very excited to be here today as well. A lot of fun to visit and look at different virtual worlds. And really, I think this is a great venue for us to talk about some of the things that we really passionately believe in terms of being able to create immersive learning environments. And I really think it's important, as does Tony, to ensure that these environments are used correctly and that people get the most use out of them possible. So that's why we kind of put the book together. We really wanted to make sure that when people engaged in these environments, they were engaging in a manner that made sense, that was impactful, and that really leveraged the technology.
Good. So when Carl and I were coming to this, we're both technologists by nature, and we started to say, okay, what is it? What is it that makes a difference? And I still remember, David, when we first met, and you were asking, hey, I'm thinking this could be a good thing for business, and how might it work, etc. And tell me a little bit about the technology. And Carl and I kind of worked together to determine what it is that makes this different. So we're going to do a little back and forth here. If you have any questions as we're talking, feel free to raise your hand. But what we came up with is essentially, if you look up here, the 7 sensibilities, we call them. The first one is the sense of self. And what we're essentially saying with the sensibilities here is, what is it that makes this technology different? And right now, I'm sitting here and, I can gesture to myself. To make it really real, I can run over here and I can literally do this. Watch this. I can connect with Carl, but I can also walk right over to Carl and maybe even bump into him a little bit. And Carl might get a little upset about that. Walk right through the guy. It's like, wait a minute, you just walked through me. What's going on here? I don't get this. You're being mean to me, and he's not too happy about that. So the first thing is, right now, this is my digital sock puppet. I'm right here, and this is very different than a mouse. Carl and I are both here, and we're real people inhabiting virtual avatars, and the term avatar is really an Indian term for the gods when they came down and inhabited bodily forms. So really, I think the kind of sense of self and the avatar becomes a really important factor. Just this weekend, Carl and I both got our pictures and put them in here, and it's amazing how much time I actually spent trying to get myself look like myself. And this is something we talk about in the book. Carl, you may want to emphasize a little bit on this, where when you're in a corporate context, I want to see what your real names are. I see Glenn, and I see Dan, and I see Jeff. I don't see Furry Rabbit 2 or Johnny Moonwalker 7. These are real people, and I think the kind of power of presence of being here with a sense of self with an avatar really makes it real. Carl?
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Tony. And really, the interesting thing is a lot of research is backing up that sense of self. So, for example, there's some studies out at Stanford that said that people that watch an avatar look like themselves are actually more likely, that look at an avatar that looks like themselves exercising, are actually more likely to actually exercise 24 hours later than people that looked at an avatar that didn't look like them or didn't look like an avatar at all. Other studies show that, unfortunately, the same biases that are in the physical world are in the virtual world. Basically, people take the virtual world very literally, and our mind has trouble telling the difference. In fact, there was an article today in Wired, and the guy said, when you're a character in the screen, there is a very short time before the formation of your intention to act, and when something happens on the screen, he calls it neurological magic that makes you feel like you're the character. So one of the things that we talk about often is, in a virtual world, people ask me, should we let people have their own avatar, or should we let them customize their avatar? Definitely, avatar customization provides a sense of investment that you don't get from a disembodied name in a 2D virtual training class.
So any questions on that one? Any thoughts, concerns? But we believe that avatar agency, the fact that I can get up and move around, the fact that I have actually got a digital sock puppet, that I have a representation inside these contexts, really makes a difference. Any questions? I'm scanning the audience here.
I don't see any. Yeah, okay. We really feel it does make a difference, and the research is starting to back up kind of what we've said. Does Anna have a question over there?
I do have a question. I'm hoping you can hear me, but
Anna, go ahead.
I'm wondering. Oh, great. I'm just wondering that when you have these avatars in a space like this, then do you allow them to move around like you guys are moving around, or are we pretty much locked into our seat? And how does that affect affect what you're doing in terms
that. That kind of depends, Anna, on how you want to set things up. One of the difficult things about any environment is learning how to operate inside of it, and in many kind of other environments, you're first having to take through a whole set of navigation on how to fly and how to do all these different things, and at the same time, when you bring this into a corporate context and you say it's going to be used in a learning environment, the first thing that executives who want to make investments want to do is see an environment like this, kind of like a classroom. And so I think that VenueGen's done a really good job of kind of making it so that when you first land, you're sitting in a seat and you can look around and you can zoom in and out. And then as you start to create different types of collaborative contexts, you can then start to explore the space. So that's the tricky part of what's the way in. And I think in this context, we could set you all loose at the end for a little conversation. You can come up and interact with us. And then I'll be able to recognize your face and say, oh, hey, Anna, how are you doing? Huh?
And I think, yeah, no, I agree. And the other thing is that once we become more familiar with these environments, we can do things. So, for example, if you have a facilitated exercise, you could say, okay, everybody that thinks the answer to this question is yes, go to the front of the room, and everybody that thinks the answer is no, go to the back of the room. Or you could even set up these environments to have, multiple choice. So we can actually get people more involved. I like to say physically, even though it's virtually, moving around a space. So you don't have the limitations that you do. But typically in a forum like this type of application, we have people sitting and talking. But the next exercise or the next interaction, in a learning environment or a collaborative environment would be to get everybody up, moving around, and even going on field trips.
Hey, let me just in the interest of time, because I know David has some questions for us, and you may spark some more questions here. The second is the death of distance. Just by a show of hands, anyone from New York who's actually attending today? I don't see any hands. How about...
I saw one. I saw...
Did you see one? Okay, let me see. I wasn't looking.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Enid, yep.
Enid, there she is. How about Chicago or L.A. or Raleigh? Okay, there's a couple of people from Raleigh. There we go. All right, but the point I'm trying to make is you're all from different places, but we're here in the same space. How the heck did that happen? And that's what we call the death of distance. The way I like to say it, is that the geography is history in virtual worlds, and that this is a third space in cyberspace, right here where we are. And to Karl's point, we can really essentially create this context to be whatever we want. But the fact now that we have our sense of selves and that Karl and I are both avatars, and I can say, oh, hey, Karl, how you doing? I want to come up here and talk to you because we haven't seen each other in a while. And we can create this. Karl is not where I am right now physically, but we're here connected virtually. And what that does is actually really create a power of presence, which is the third one that says that is Karl. That's Karl over there. Let me go talk to Karl. How are you doing? And where we see this happening a lot is kind of funny. I have a story about this. When I was first demonstrating virtual worlds to my boss when I was back at IBM, I was explaining, hey, this is how it is and here's how it works. And she's like, we've got to get our senior VP of technology to see this. And I said, well, no problem. I can find him inside these virtual worlds very easily. And she said, what do you mean you can find him inside these virtual worlds? And I said, well, he hangs out inside these places all the time. And she said, you know how long it takes to get on his calendar in the real world? It takes 3 months. And I said, oh, I just saw him yesterday. So when you take the first three, which is the sense of self, here I am an avatar, I love myself. I just do. And I really like my digital sock puppet, right? And I can go and connect with another avatar who maybe loves himself, maybe even more than me, and that there is a death of distance between Karl and I right now, and that power of presence becomes really important for us to interact. I think those three become the flywheel of what makes this different than WebEx or Illuminate or Centra or any of the other kind of flat 2D, Karl and I call them flatland applications, that many of you probably use today. Karl, those are the first three. Any comments on those ones?
Well, I just think that the combination of those are very powerful. And if you think about how you're feeling right now, as opposed to maybe a 2D environment, and the sense of being with other people. Compare that to we do a whole thing in the book about a disembodied voice and trying to get to know somebody in a 2D virtual flatland interface versus a 3D interface. 3D is how we interact naturally. We're programmed to work in the 3D world. And interestingly, our mind has trouble differentiating some virtual experiences from real experience. So we can get very rich experience in the 3D world because we are actually operating in the 3D environment in which we're comfortable, and our mind says, yeah, that is Tony right there. This is an audience. We are in a room. So it works very effectively. Tony?
Yeah, just to make that real, the mind itself can't differentiate between carbon and silicon. So after this meeting, I'm going to remember that Thomas over here and Betsy both had red hats, and that they said certain thing to me, and that Thomas was sitting up here to my right, and that's a cue for me to remember. Or that Tina came down from the back and she had that brown jacket on and asked me a question, or that David back here is got a really nice academic-looking Argyle sweater there that it behooves you there, Dave. Maybe you should come hang out at Fuqua with us, right? And all of those cues are coming into my mind as affordances to help me remember this context, and those cues you do not get. You just simply don't get in a 2D Brady Bunch type of scenario. And we, since we've come out of the soup, this is what we've done. We've processed and we've gotten memory and visual cues through our context, and this is the context that we know best as human beings. Okay, moving on. We are now anthropomorphized humanoid form, and we talk a lot about avatars. But you could be anthropomorphized to something other than that if you wanted to be. You could be a white blood cell. You could kind of sit on a rocket ship and move through time. There's lots of different things you can do to play with space. You can set up virtual spaces here where Karl just mentioned this earlier, where we could say, look, we're all in this room, but now all of a sudden all the people who say no to a question, all the people who say yes to a question could be immediately transported to another room. I was in a session yesterday in Atlanta with a large company, and we were trying to manage the breakouts. And we said, you know what, during the breakouts, we're going to have to allow 20 minutes, because the minute they break, it's going to be 20 minutes before we can actually get them into the other rooms. You avoid that loss of time in this context. We just say, okay, Dan and Eamon and Paul and Jeff and Dan and Letitia, you all go, boom, into another focus room, and then you're there instantly. So we can play with space in many ways in these environments. Karl?
Yeah, and the neat thing about these environments, or one of the questions I think that Anna had in the chat, was how familiar are people becoming with these 3D environments? And I always like to tell the story that I teach instructional technology, and I always like to tell the story that several years ago, I had to teach students, you see that blue underlined word in your web browser? That's a link. And you have to click on that link to open another window, and sometimes that window opens behind your other window, and you have to look for it. So the navigational elements of 3D actually are becoming much more simpler, much easier to work. The challenge that we have in the corporate environment and the government agencies, although they seem to be adopting it at a fairly robust rate, is to make people understand this is not a game environment. We are not doing this because we're playing games or because it's fun, but because it actually has collaborative implications, learning implications, and meeting implications. I talked to a virtual world gentleman the other day, and he said one of the biggest complaints he hears is people in 2D virtual classrooms, people don't feel engaged. People don't feel involved. That lack of engagement is missing, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but this type of environment allows for that to happen. Tony?
Right. And you may not be able to play a game, but you can do a groovy dance if you want, right? So it doesn't mean we take all the fun out of it, but that we can certainly bring the essence of our humanness into our sock puppet. Let's go on to the next three. So the capability to co-create. Carl and I are co-creating an experience right here, and we're used to working with each other in virtual worlds, and hopefully that's coming across in some way, shape, or form, that we like to feed off each other's energy. We kind of know where the next person's going, and candidly, we really enjoy being able to do it in the context rather than going to a big training conference where we were last year talking to 1,000 people about this. I actually believe that your experience is going to be far richer because you are immersed with us, and that's a really important thing. The pervasiveness of practice and the enrichment of experience, I think, those are the two things that really allow folks the opportunity to practice over and over and over again. Carl and I practiced before we came in to make sure we gave a good presentation. I was able to do that all weekend long as much as I wanted, nobody else watching. Lots of people who like to do practice. You can rehearse it almost, like it's real, and your practice time becomes more valuable. The enrichment of experience, there's a lot of emotional stories we could share here. There's many people who suffered post-traumatic stress disorder or who have lost limbs, who find themselves getting a lot of benefit out of being inside this environment. One very moving story is a friend of mine who created a place called the Agora Ballroom, which is essentially a place where you could go and dance and do the foxtrot and the tango and the two-step and all that kind of thing. And he had a client, a person who came to that place and said, "Hey, can I rent this for an hour? I want to bring my wife here." So he brought his wife and he asked, "Can you pipe in the song Lady in Red?" And they danced a slow song to Lady in Red, and they asked for it again. And the next day he got an email and said, "Thanks so much for doing that. The last time we danced to that song together was at our wedding." And his wife had actually been in a car accident the following day and lost the use of her limbs. So this provided them the opportunity to enrich their experience and enjoy the dance that they had 20 years ago all over again. So there's lots you can do in these environments. We shouldn't just bound ourselves or limit ourselves or routine ourselves to us sitting in a classroom like we are here. We have to think about how we can extend the virtual experience in a meaningful way to drive learning. Carl?
And to emphasize that point, actually, some research was done in the virtual world of Second Life, and they found that there's a higher population of disabled individuals in the world of Second Life than in the general population. So it's really a rich environment for them to take advantage of, but it's also a rich environment for us to take advantage of. I mean, imagine practicing negotiation in the boardroom of your client's organization, or walking through the factory to find out where some safety violations might be, or we're working with the Department of Public Welfare in Pennsylvania, and they're redoing the layouts of their offices. And so we're showing new people what their roles are, where they're supposed to stand, how to orient themselves to the office. So those types of things become very rich. And if you think about it, as Tony mentioned before, when you remember this session, you'll remember, that Tony was wearing, a blue blazer with a white shirt. You'll remember these visual cues much more than you would in a 2D environment. Tony?
So, if you take these 7 sensibilities and you put them together, Carl and I came up with an equation, and that equation is I times I equals E. Anyone care to hazard a guess on what I times I equals E means? Has anyone read the book or had a chance to look at the book? No hands. Oh, okay, Enid. Do you remember what the equation said by any chance, Enid? I'm trying to show some of the interactivity we have. You just have to push tab to talk, I believe.
Tony, that's a tall order for Enid. I'm not sure I remember.
Ah, well, that's the difference story. We can't help you with that, Carl. Enid? This is the professor in me. I always have to put a student on the spot, right? Bought it but not finished it, Sandra Adams says. Great examples, Carl. I'm just looking through chat. Let me tell you what
Enid's probably as nervous now as she would be in her actual classroom.
That's right. I can actually, if I zoom in, I think I can see her blush. No, she's listening. Look. Okay, cool. And this is it. I mean, we're already starting to play and interact now and have fun with the interface and see how I can actually do things like that. But let me just tell you, I times I equals E is essentially immersion times interactivity equals engagement. Now, I think that a lot of the 2D environments, and Carl, I'm pretty sure you agree with me on this one, the 2D environments, they provide interactivity, I can raise my hand in a 2D environment just like I can here. I can maybe even do a smiley emoticon that says, hey, the guy's laughing or whatnot. Or if I really want to place an emphasis on something, I might be able to do that through an emoticon. But it's not immersive. Right now, you're immersed inside this context. When you're in a 2D context, you're not engaged because you're not immersed. You are interacting, but you're also doing email. In this world, it's harder to break the kind of the interaction, the immersive space. Because you're immersed, it's hard for you to be off multitasking on something else, because this is a 3D space, and our natural proclivity is to pay attention inside these environments, because we don't want to look like, we fall asleep or that we're not paying attention, because that's a social cue that we've kind of developed. So immersion is one component of engagement, but interactivity is really the thing that makes the difference. And when you get both, immersion and interactivity, the multiplier effect of those gives you engagement. And our hope here is that you are feeling that sense of engagement, that this is a different feeling than actually attending a quote-unquote web conference. You're actually now immersed in a collective conversation with us inside a third place in cyberspace. Karl?
Okay, Tony, thanks. Yeah, immersion is really critical to the overall process. And I want to talk about some really quick wins you can do with immersion. So, for example, you can very easily do collaboration around a table, a boardroom table. You can very easily come to a piece of machinery and look at that together. You can do a design project in these virtual worlds. Role plays add that immersion and collaboration. There are different levels of immersions, as Andrew had indicated. Is Second Life more immersive than this? I don't think so, no. I believe that some of the environments are more immersive, but you can create different environments using the 3D technology. So it's just the choice of this room as opposed to the choice of this technology. And then the other question, do you need programming skills to set up environments like this? You don't. Lots of times these environments are pre-rendered, so you can just walk right into them and use them. Other times, if you wanted a custom environment, obviously you're going to have to customize that, build it in a 3D program, and bring it in. So there are different requirements, just as, for example, you would build PowerPoints using PowerPoint and import them into GoToMeeting or import them into Centra or some other tools like that. Tony?
This is great. I'm just following and monitoring the chat, and what we've got is a whole bunch of people now, and they're saying, I'm stuck to my chair, I want to get out.
Tony, we've locked, right now in larger venues like this, we kind of lock people in their seat just to keep order in the room. So as people, because if they right-click and say walk here, their avatar will jump up and walk there. So just to keep everyone in their place right now, that's the way we did it. Guys, maybe if you guys want to come and sit back down here, maybe we've got a few questions that we want to go through, and a lot of people are asking questions on the chat channel, so maybe we could jump into some of the specific things that people are interested in.
That's great. I just wanted to mention, though, think of what it's saying, though, that people want to get up and walk around. I mean, you're used to a physical environment. This is a physical environment. In a 2D environment, you probably wouldn't be as motivated to walk around, or you'd be right now probably surfing the internet, answering your emails. So, again, it's one of the compelling elements about this environment. But yes, let's take some questions.
Yeah, I was going to say while Carl's coming over, the funny thing about it is you all are dying to stand up and interact now, and very similarly, if why, I don't know why, but I was actually getting tired of standing, so I had to come sit myself down. Now, you all might think that's crazy, but some of this, what we feel in the physical world and what we experience in the virtual world, really translates. Constance Steinkuhler's done a fair amount of work on this, where essentially, I just had to sit my avatar down here because I was a little tired. So, David, how do you want to? Do we want to go after the chat stuff, or do we want to just ask the audience?
Well, we have a few questions here that people have put in, and I've got a few too that people emailed prior to the conference. It's funny you talking about the feedback that you get, from the audience. Everybody's out there, wanting to participate, and one instructor told me a few weeks ago. She put it this way. She said using a flatland modality to teach classes is kind of like talking into the abyss and hoping for the best. And I thought that was really well put. When you're not getting that continuous feedback, you're like, are they out there? Are they listening? And I don't know if you guys heard this, but there was a study too that came out a few weeks ago, a survey, and they surveyed people taking a class, and I think the modality was WebEx. And they went around and actually monitored how much time was spent on the screen share being projected out. And the funny thing was they found that 60% of the people that were in that class were not, at any given moment, were not viewing the content being displayed. And so it really, that lack of engagement that Karl was talking about, again, in the most recent ASTD study, saying, again, 3 years running, online lack of engagement was the single number one problem faced again this year.
Couldn't emphasize that enough. I mean, a lot of these tools have the capability to actually measure whether or not the web conference screen is the screen that's being used the most on the laptop of the user, and guess what? It's not, and that's because you're not immersed, and if you're not immersed, you're not engaged. So it's kind of like we're increasing the efficiency with which we train poorly by having a narrower modality. By having a more immersive modality like this, and Karl, I know you can talk to this as well as me, but my experience is that you can run a whole day-long session inside of an environment like this with breakouts without any degradation of attention. But the minute you try and do that in a flatland application, you're going to see a huge drop-off after the first hour or two, because people just have other things to do. Whereas in an environment like this, David, and if you can jump from one room to another, and you have a conference room or a campfire, or you can set the room context to the task at hand, a brainstorming room or a deciding room or a keynote room. And you keep moving people around, and what's even more important is the social aspect. I promise, I don't know if I can promise, but I think we should let these folks free towards the end and just come up and have that informal water cooler chat with Karl and I, because that's where the real value comes from these environments.
Certainly. Well, Tony, one of the questions that was sent in is, of the 7 sensibilities, and obviously this is someone who has who's read your book, which do you think is the most important for creating engagement? Of all the 7, which do you think is the most important?
Well, if I was to say, if I had to pick one, if you're going to make me really pick one, I'm probably going to go with the sense of self, because that's why it's top of the list. I'm looking at you, David. I know you, and I see your face here, and I can very quickly just make that transition. This is not a phone call, and it's your sense of self and my sense of self coming together. I'm looking at Karl over there. I'm like, he's not paying attention to us. Put your hand back in your pocket. There you go, Karl. Pay attention to me here. You don't get that.
Now I feel he's looking at me.
Nah, exactly. Because I was catching him over there goofing off. Right? You got to watch Karl. He's kind of like that.
I'm chatting.
So I'd pick sense of self. I'd be curious to know what Karl thinks.
Karl, what do you think is the most important of the sensibilities?
Actually, usually I don't agree with Tony, but in this case, I'm going to have to agree with it. I think, if you look at the research in terms of, there was another study done at Stanford where they took an individual and aged the individual's avatar and found out that later on, the individual was more likely to invest in their future self because they were invested in, what it would be like to become older. When they do research, there's some research going on to find out people from certain cultures in virtual worlds maintain social distances. So I guess that sense of distance. So I guess maybe both of them together. So the amazing thing is we don't act all that different in a virtual world as we do in the physical world. So if we're sitting in a meeting, if we are working with other people, we get much more authentic environment and collaboration than we do in 2D. We're much more comfortable working in the 3D environment that's immersive than a 2D environment. So I really think that probably the two, the sense of self and the power of presence, really work, because we can eliminate distance with virtual classrooms. But if I ask how many people have ever sat here through an entire virtual presentation in Flatland and not looked at their email, I mean, that's almost an impossible task.
Mm-hmm. Agreed completely.
Yeah. It's funny. I think that I would agree with you, Tony, that the sense of self is probably the most important, because just being able to turn your head, we found, and look at people, being able to put that targeting circle on their face and make eye contact. I mean, I feel that I'm really looking at you. And when I stand up in front of a group, like this group here, when all these people turn and look at you, it's kind of that spotlight effect of your energy level goes up. You're anything but a passive bystander, and people don't feel empowered to choose where they want to look, or they just kind of turn their brains off. And when you turn your brain off, then everything else just kind of goes, all the engagement and retention and all the factors that we really want kind of disappear.
I couldn't agree more, Karl. I mean, I know that there's even a philosophical term for this, when all the heads turn and pay attention to you. I can't remember what it is, but I do know that you and I stumbled across this at one of the virtual world conferences that was more, in the cognitive realm, and what are the cues? What are the social cues? Like right now, you may not be doing it, but you certainly look like you're paying attention to me as I zoom in on your face. And that helps with that helps. This immersive context just really helps with engagement, and more interactivity is not going to get the kind of engagement you want. I would give up on some interactivity to have more immersivity, and I believe you'll get more engagement. And if you just look at the globe today and where the economy is moving, as a business professor sitting at Duke, and where if you just look at the demographic dividend that the East has, we're going to have to work more and more at a distance, and more importantly, we're going to have to create more and more at a distance. And if we have to create more and more at a distance, we need to have an immersive context like this. You're not going to brainstorm the next iPad on WebEx.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a question from the audience now. Would someone like to just raise your hand and ask a question? I'll dig back through the chat questions, but if you'd like to ask the question verbally, you can just raise your hand.
Let me take one of the chat questions, if that's okay.
Okay, go right ahead.
So one person asked about how does one redesign materials for this environment, and I think the really important thing to think about with the virtual environment is that you now can control the context in which the learning occurs. And Tony and I talk about this actually a great deal in the book, but the idea is that in a classroom, the context. There's going to be desks, there's going to be a whiteboard, there's going to be, certain bio breaks at certain periods of time. But in a virtual world, here we're kind of in a classroom environment, but VenueGen has plenty of other type of environments, a church environment and different war room environment. And you now are in the position to engineer the environment to facilitate the learning. And for me, I think that's really kind of an interesting element that's not available in the classroom. And Vera, am I still echoing?
No, you sound good to me, Karl. David, if I may, I'd like to take another one. There was one in there that says, hey, what about these kind of environments for more emotional things like conflict resolution? We've just talked about the sense of self and the identity. There's a woman named Margaret Reagan who ran the diversity and inclusion practice for a major consulting firm. And she's since broken out, and she uses these environments for teaching diversity and micro inequities. So imagine now if I wasn't anthropomorphized to someone who looks like myself, but I could come in as somebody of a different ethnicity, perhaps significantly older, perhaps more overweight than I am, and be taken through a set of activities so I can actually experience what it means to be ignored or to be objectified, or to be essentially just not even acknowledged, and the visceral feeling I get from that, because I look like something other than who I really am inside this environment, really can be powerful. I can't emphasize how powerful that is. So sometimes in a role play, like Carl was saying, you might take on a role other than yourself inside this environment, and it's actually more powerful than doing a role play in class, where I'd say to Carl, okay, pretend that you are, a 6-foot beautiful blonde bodyguard. A lifeguard on a beach. Well, we could have fun in the classroom thinking that, right, Carl? But Carl could actually be that kind of person inside these environments, and we'd have to, play with the voice a little bit, obviously. But there's so much more that you can do if we just go beyond what we're doing sitting here in terms of driving some serious learning. So we're clearly bullish on its opportunity.
There's one question coming in here.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, David.
Did you want to? Sorry, David.
Yeah, there was a question that came through the chat here, and it's just like, I think it's an excellent question. How do you overcome skepticism and get buy-in in the corporate environment? Actually, this was one of the questions that was sent to us as well. And they were just saying, hey, a lot of these skills, a lot of the things we're talking about here are soft skills, better retention and better engagement and things like that. But if you're talking to your boss going, hey, what am I playing with cartoons here? What is the hard ROI? How do you make a case and say, hey, this is really important. This is giving us real business competitive advantage. How would you help this person?
Well,
right. So,
go ahead, Carl.
Okay, so I think there's a couple things that you can do, and Tony and I agree on this. Is you got to get them in the environment. It's one thing to talk about this type of environment. It's one thing to show this environment, but it's quite another thing to be in the environment. And when they're in the environment, that I think makes all the difference. The other thing that I always say is we've had, for our most critical learning in our society, for people that fly airplanes, for the military that protects our country, we've always had very elaborate simulations like this and environments like this. What we can now have is we can now have a simulation of other environments because it's so cost effective. We can now have a simulation of a sales meeting. We can now have a simulation of walkthrough in terms of an audit. We can now have a simulation in terms of a design meeting. And all that allows us to do is be interactive. And the advantage of this type of environment over, let's say, a pure branching simulation is we can go off in a million different branches because there's actually two real people behind the avatars. So when I have a question and we're doing a role play, a sales role play or a doctor, a patient role play or anything like that, we can go off in any direction that we want. And we're not limited by the programming of the computer, not to mention the ability to collaborate. So overcoming it means getting the person in the environment. Overcoming it, I think, means explaining to them the use of this type of technology and then showing the real business value. So what's the loss of someone who happens to be not paying attention in a WebEx versus somebody who is paying attention? I'm working on a project right now where we're doing virtual investigations. So, somebody comes in your office and says, I've been harassed. There has to be a full-scale investigation. And doing it in these types of environment, walking from office to office, when the person's done, they feel like they've actually done the investigation. And that's what is critical. And I think we need to focus on performance outcomes that are done. If you go to Bandura's social learning theory, we learn through observation. And there was a really fascinating research study done that showed that people in high school, people were asked, they broke people into two groups. One group was asked to imagine an embarrassing situation in high school in first person and one in third person. And they found out that the people that imagined it in third person were much more likely to say they've gotten beyond that situation than people that imagined it in first person. And one other thing, and then I'll turn over to Tony, but they asked people to imagine themselves voting in first person and third person. And it actually found out that people that voted in imagine themselves voting in third person, were more likely to go and actually vote than in first person. So this environment not only is effective for learning, but actually might be more effective than some other environments.
Yes, I'm amazed at how different people are using our VenueGen environments. We have pharmaceutical companies doing a lot of the role playing, where you walk into an office and there are objections, and they're being trained how to overcome various objections and obstacles that they face in that process. And one of the other things we found with another company, when they're training on the medical software, they bring them into the front office, and their actual software is running on laptops, in browsers on the laptops, so they can check in, they can go to a waiting area, they can then go back to an exam room where CPT codes are entered and so forth. On the way back out, they can check insurance and schedule a next meeting. But it's literally, the entire process of walking through how to use their application and how various people interact with the application. And you just can't do that outside of an immersive environment like this one.
Couldn't agree with you more. Enid had a question, I think. There's Enid. Okay, there's Enid. So Enid was saying, I'd love to use this for onboarding. I think that's another one. If you want to get on the on-ramp of the internet moving to the Immernet, the immersive internet, there's clearly those people who are the younger generation World of Warcrafters, Second Lifers, Webkinners, Penguiners, who are used to inhabiting a different identity, who are used to, having digital sock puppets of different kinds. So that's a good on-ramp, is to kind of get the onboarding community, and maybe not even in a learning context, but actually in a community context. Hey, all of the folks who've onboarded at a certain company, BP did this, we wrote about it in our book, IBM's done this as well, where just this is a way for you to get together. So the people who've onboarded and experienced what it's like to onboard in Japan, and the people who've done so in Armonk, and the people who've done so in London, why don't you meet in the third place in cyberspace and just have a conversation about it? Another thing that's a great use of this, David, that I think you could never do in a virtual, in a flatland application, is kind of speed mentoring. So this idea where you essentially have cocktail tables set up all across here, and what you'd essentially do is you'd say, okay, you all just have 2 minutes at each table. You have a little chat. You figure out whether or not you get along. You keep going. And at the end of the day, at the end of the hour, the person that you connected with the most, you go back and talk to them about perhaps more of a mentorship career. So you could see kind of executives coming in and new high potentials, just having that spark of an interaction. And that could really drive up mentorship across geographies, which is something we all need. I challenge anyone to be able to do that in a 2D environment, but I do believe it has strong potential in this kind of context.
Absolutely. So we've got time for one or two more questions. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to send one in via chat, or just raise your hand and state your question? A little bit of an echo. Someone on dial-in has an open speaker, and I don't want to throw them out of the meeting, but if it comes intolerable, I will do that.
Oh, you're so mean, David.
We will. Okay, any other questions?
I say, can we cut them loose?
Yeah, sure. We can.
And then we can maybe just have a little more spontaneous interaction, or?
I'll tell you, before we do that, let me give them a real quick tutorial just on, excuse me, Carl, I'm going to walk around you here. Guys, what I'll do is I'll go around and give you all mobility, and I'll also let you control content. So if you want to use the things that you can do, and by the way, if you're interested, if anyone wants to know more about VenueGen, you can certainly go to our website, and you've already created an account. You can hold unlimited free meetings now for 2 to 3 people. So if you want to show this to other people, or if you'd like for us to have a demo, we'd be happy to meet with you and walk you through all the things the application can do. But here's a few things that you can experiment with right now. If you push down on your wheel, you have a laser pointer. And so you can all practice using that. If you don't have a mouse wheel, then you can hold down your control button and your left click, and use your laser create it that way. I see many of you using it. Looks like a Star Trek convention now.
Mike did like this feature. This is Star Wars.
Everyone shoot Tony.
Oh.
Now, if you want to walk somewhere, just right-click on the floor and say "Walk here," and you can also drive the avatar with your arrow keys if you prefer that. And if you want to control content up here on the main board, if you just right-click anywhere up here, you can open sample content and do things like that. So I will go around and give you all move-around privileges. By the way, there was a drawing, and everyone who's been here today, we are going to put all those names into a pot, and then we're going to pull out, I think, 2 or 3 different names, and you're going to get a copy. We're going to mail you a free copy of Tony and Karl's book for showing up today. My name's David Gardner, and I'm going to put my information up here as well, just so you guys can see it. And if you'd like any additional information about VenueGen, let me just say the final slide right here. Oh, that's not it. Let me close that out. And no, maybe not. Well, anyway, it's you can certainly find us at VenueGen.com.
Oop.
All right, I'm going to go around the room and just give each of you, and Tina, maybe if you could help me, just make everyone a moderator. And what that'll do is it'll let you allow content, and it'll also allow you to move around. I'm just going to go down the row and give all of you this capability. And you should see a little pop-up on your screen as I get around to you that says you're being allowed content control and you're being allowed mobility. Okay, I see some people. All right, the first row's done. You guys can have at it. Well, as you're walking around, feel free to come up and talk to Tony and Karl. I really appreciate you all being here today, taking time out to learn about this modality. It is exciting. We've got just about everybody. If there's anyone that can't move around or control content, just let me know. And
Got people running around here, huh?
our goal at VenueGen is to restore those things that are uniquely human back into virtual meetings. Unlike web conferencing today that primarily focuses on shared content, we want to create immersive shared experiences that are much more engaging, more personal, and as such, more productive. Now, our staff meetings in Raleigh and Boston just got underway. Let's join them.
Where'd you go, David?
Our focus groups said that VenueGen is perfect for company meetings and training.
And you know, all the customers I've spoken
Are
to
we all open mic now?
use us for both.
Hey, guys.
Hey, David.
Can you hear me? This is Tina.
Hey, do you mind if I show the folks here at
Hear you,
demo how we
Tina?
do our meetings?
Yes, actually, we have a known
Well,
bug
first of
in
all,
our
VenueGen
system
has
that
almost no learning curve.
when we put
I
content
just
up on the
click the link in the
screen,
email message that I received,
everything you
and
can
my
put as much
browser
content
opens
as you'd
the
like,
3D
but
environment.
was introduced in
To
our
look
latest
around,
release was
I just click and
when you
drag
have
the screen.
a browser open.
My mouse wheel
it
lets
needs
me
to be the
zoom
only
my
thing on the
focus.
screen. And so apparently everyone got kicked out. I apologize for that. It's a known issue, and when we let everyone control the content, of course, they didn't know that. So that's how it goes. I'm glad it was at the end of the session at least. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
This is Anna. Can you hear me? And I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, great. So there were multiple people up there. I mean, I understand what Tony and Karl were as the presenter, and it looked like David maybe was a moderator. What was your role then, Tina?
I'm just sitting in the back of the room, and I'm trying to make sure I can give moderator privileges to people. So I've been sitting in the back, just kind of observing, been trying to record the session as we go along. So that's
you're
what I've been
kind of
doing.
acting as maybe the technical producer per se, kind of doing that part?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome, thanks.
Now I've got a question. This is Tom.
Sure.
Are you available to sit in with us, or who would be if we want to introduce a particular corporate client to this for the very first time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can send me an email, and I'm happy to sit in for the first couple of minutes, make sure everyone, has a smooth experience, and you can also give them my email address and in advance if they want to create their account, if they have any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Tina?
Yes.
I'm afraid I have to drop off right now, but I really appreciate the chance to come in and talk about this stuff with everybody. And, you can reach me at my email. Just look for Tony O'Driscoll at Duke. So I appreciate it very much, and I hope you enjoyed the session.
Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Good job.
If you guys need to email me, you can just email
Bye.
support@venuegen.com. Again, that's support@venuegen.com.
Thanks, Tina.
Hi, Tina.
Goodbye, y'all. Signing off.